Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the finance panel. Hope all of you have enjoyed lunch and the conversation with alum. My name is Long Yan, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. I graduated from the college last June with an econ major. Currently, I'm a first-year analyst with the Lazard Mergers Acquisitions Group based in Chicago. First of all, on behalf of the students here, I would like to thank all the panelists for coming here today. As well as the students and faculty members who helped put this together. Today we have 5 very experienced professionals in finance, and I do encourage all of you to take advantage of that and ask as many questions as you have. We have about 75 minutes, and I would like to delegate the first 50 minutes to introductions, and another 45 minutes to the questions that I prepared for them. And the last 50 minutes, I'll just open up questions from the floor. So to get started for our panelists here, could you please start off by introducing yourselves, including your affiliations with UChicago, your current employer, and your role at the firm? If applicable, maybe talk a little bit more about your career path prior to your current job. We'll start with Christian.
Sure. So my name is Christian Habits. I was at the college. I formally got my degree in '98. I was really there from '91 to '95. I worked with Credit Suisse. I run one of our family office and also had both management groups. The career path, I think, consists with most of the folks who will chat today. Took a couple of moves back and forth. Started out as a private equity analyst for a family office in Chicago. Spent 2 years there, spent a couple of years as a trader at CBOE. So technology was effectively a large part of that business fell away, and for the last 13 years, I've been in wealth management, the last 5 of which are Credit Suisse.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Alumni. I got my bachelor's degree decades before any of you were born, in 1970. Majored in biology, and went back to Booth and got my MBA in 1976. My career path has been exceedingly circuitous. When I finished college, because at that point there was no career paths, none. No recruiting, everybody go to graduate school or professional school, and I could get a job working in a research lab, which is what I did for a few years. And the good part about that was I learned that I didn't want to be working in a research lab. And still had no idea what I wanted to do. And I'm saying this for a reason, because I think you don't need to be sure what you want to do. But I did know that getting an MBA would broaden my options. So I did that. I then moved into corporate finance and banking, which I did for quite a long time in Chicago, in London, and in New York. And not recently, but a number of years ago, moved into wealth management, working with families and helping them to create strategies for their financial goals, and also working with them to hopefully reach their goals. I now am a principal at a small firm which is called Stonebridge Wealth Management in Chicago. And I've stayed involved with the university through Booth, through the college to some degree, and the women's board of the university.
All right, my name is Kristen Beal, and I'm an investment manager at Mazur Financial. I received my undergraduate degree from UC in 2003, and that was actually an international studies focused on human rights. And after that, I worked for a law firm, and then decided that I would come back to UC and get my master's in public policy from Harris School. From there, I worked at a nonprofit, and then I decided that I wanted to go into wealth management. I worked at another wealth management firm for company Mazur in 2009.
So I am not Eric Vasquez, I am Tim Richards. Eric unfortunately couldn't make it today, so I'm stepping in for him. I graduated from college in 2007 with a degree in international studies. To give you guys a little bit of my background, I grew up in called a flower farm in New Hampshire. My dad's a botanist, a contractor, my mom's real estate. So growing up with that, I had no desire to be in real estate whatsoever. and we'll talk about my career path afterwards. So when I graduated, I started off consulting. I went back to Boston. About a year into that, I decided I wanted to get banking, which was probably the worst possible time to do that. So think about this, I graduated in 07, here it's 08, I get a job in finance, and I'm working in the bank at Northern Trust in Chicago. And as I'm getting hired, all my friends are getting laid off. The financial market hits. And so I'm there for about 3 years, and after about a year and a half, they moved me into the real estate group. So my parents work in real estate. I had no desire to be in real estate. I have a degree in international studies, and now here I am in real estate. Not what I expected. So it's kind of drawing the picture of the career trajectories here. But after that, I left and I went to my client. So I work for a company called General Growth. We are one of the largest mall owners in the country. So we own Water Tower, for one that you probably know. I work in the capital markets group. So I moved from the bank to the client. And now I do basically what I was doing at the bank, but I do it on a more structured basis at the company, structuring debt and equity throughout.
I'm Josh Hostetter. I graduated from the college in 2009 with a degree in political science. And since graduating the college, I've worked primarily in the principal investing side of the market, focused initially on real estate, aviation, and technology companies, and now in my current position with WHI Real Estate Partners, which is affiliated with William Harris Investors, so the Harris School of Public Policy. So our seed investor is a very high net worth family based out of Chicago. And at WHI, I sit on the investment team. I focus primarily on distressed debt, opportunistic, and special situations investing in the real estate market. All asset classes across the country and across the capital structure as well. I think, just to give a brief background in terms of the path that kind of led me to investing and luckily kind of the principal side of the business, received a Jeff Metcalf Fellowship in between my third and fourth year at the college, focused there or worked in between Vienna and London, focusing on hedge fund and private equity clients. So got some very good exposure to those sectors of the business, covering primarily European and Eastern European economies and investments. So gained a lot of exposure there and had the opportunity upon graduation to work for a pretty large multi-strategy investment manager, which led me to my current position, which focuses on real estate.
All right, thank you. So my next question will be, what are some typical responsibilities that your job entails? And maybe give us some examples of the day-to-day responsibilities that you have. And more importantly, could you share with us some challenging aspects of your job?
So I think, general responsibilities in wealth management, if you had to summarize, and I think Barbara will have her version of this, but there's essentially you're running your own business inside of a firm, whether it's a global investment bank or a boutique, and there's a marketing and sales component, also AKA business development, where people have to know what you do. They have to be aware of what you do, what is your firm does, and what you do well. Once they understand that, there's a sales component, right? There's not a lot of marketing and sales at the University of Chicago, but at the end of the day, these things come to play. Once you've had a conversation with a potential client and shared your value proposition, the idea is that you effectively have to persuade them that the money's going to live somewhere, right? It's going to live at Credit Suisse or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or a boutique shop, and it's your job to convince them that your institution and your team is the people who are going to be good stewards of that capital. So that's kind of the first part of the business, and then the second part is how do you allocate that capital in such a way that it meets the goals and objectives of the family, and that might be different for an entrepreneur than it would be, for example, the Harris family, who is creating multi-generational wealth and has created a family office effectively to manage their capital. So there's a marketing component, a sales component, and then ultimately what my business card says is relationship manager, where you're looking after the ongoing needs of that family and staying abreast of the global capital markets, which become increasingly more complex every day. The challenge is there's a lot of competition. It's hard.
I would agree with everything that you said. I think another big component in wealth management, or another two big components, which are part of what makes it fulfilling and part of what makes it challenging and frustrating is the human element. Sometimes you leave at the end of the day and say, well, I couldn't charge what a psychiatrist charged per hour, but that's what I was doing today. Because you have to understand the individuals with whom you're working, what's going on in their lives, the good things, the bad things. You have to listen to them, you have to deal with them, and you really get quite amazingly and intricately involved with people's lives. That can be really frustrating sometimes. It can also be very gratifying when you know that you're making a difference in their life. Another, and this part I would just say on the challenge side, not so much on the upside. We've had very volatile markets, and we need to spend a lot of time and energy on managing people's expectations, on having them understand that if somebody calls you and says, I need you to help me earn 15% a year, every year, I literally will say to them, if I knew how to do that, I'd be home in my pajamas in front of my computer. And you just have to constantly bring people back to reality, keep them focused, keep them from panicking, and keep them from having the craziest expectations that are impossible to meet.
So for me, I'm in wealth management, but I also manage retirement plans, 401k plans, pension plans, and money for individuals and families and foundations. And so I'm gonna just kind of run you through my typical day. And so, you have all your emails waiting for you. You get up at like 5, and of course you've got some client that has emailed you at like 3:30 in the morning. And then you're thinking, okay, it's not a reasonable time for me to email them back. I need a second anyways. But my example there is that your clients, if you're doing a good job, generally feel intricately connected to you. And so they feel that they can email you at 3:30 in the morning or 11 o'clock at night with all types of different problems that they're having, and you want them to do that. So that's one of the things and challenges that you have, right? Because a good way to keep your clients is to, as Christian was saying, relationship management, is to be with them a lot, interact with them. So a good chunk of my time is just spent, I'd say, with my clients, not even doing anything that has to do with their portfolios. So golfing in the summertime, going to different networking events, supporting their charities, things like that. So there's that portion of it, getting into the office and then dealing with all the providers who are helping me service them. So then, dealing with their calls, their emails. So 401k plans, you have your Fidelities who are the record keepers, and then the compliance people. Another part of that are a lot of the presentations for me and the education that I do quarterly with those participants, and preparing for meetings there. And then meeting with clients also throughout the day. So you've got your lunch meetings and then coffee meetings, and at the same time trying to grow my business. So reaching out to prospective clients. And then in the evening, going to different networking events to try to find more clients. So it's a really busy time. And on top of that, still staying on top of, all of the funds that they're being invested in, how their portfolios are allocated, wondering if I should make changes, for my aggressive clients, things like that. So it's exciting, but I would say a big part of it is really the relationship part, and that's the positive and the negative. So that's kind of what my day looks like.
So my day, I think the theme here is that everyone thinks they're going to do one thing when they walk in with the course today, and then whether you even achieve that in the first 20 minutes before you get sidetracked is neither here nor there, but it's most likely you probably will start in and you're like, oh great, I'm going to work on this project, and then 20 minutes later you're already off and something else being dragged into. And I think that's kind of the theme overall is, my job, so when I moved over to my General Growth, they were emerging from bankruptcy. They were the largest non-financial bankruptcy in the US, about $20 billion of debt that everyone got paid out in the end. It worked out great, but it was very tumultuous. There was a lot of turnover in senior management, just a wild time to be over there. And the group that I came into was particularly focused because we were the ones restructuring the debt. So think of 19 billion, you have 160 malls at the time. We're doing spin-offs. We're taking like a portfolio of companies, and all of a sudden now they're no longer part of us. They're their own publicly traded company. We're structuring the mortgages on not only the properties but also on bonds we had outstanding. It's the residuals of that. The first 2 years when I was there, it was basically just clean up. It was all right. We just emerged from bankruptcy. Now let's clean all this up, and that could lead to anything going on over the course of the day. And even though things have slowed down a little bit now that the debt's been refinanced, you still find that over the course of the day you're doing all sorts of different projects. And you think of finance generally as finance is math, but you'd be amazed by how much reading and writing you need to also factor in. When you think of like loan documentation and all this other things that you necessarily wouldn't have thought that this is finance related. The core, they talk about how it makes you it's broad and base, and you're going to learn all these things. It's incredibly invaluable because over the course of the day, I'm not just doing numbers. I'm not just building a model, trying to figure out what is the best cost of capital, best structure I can make for this property I'm trying to put debt on. It could be also, let's structure these loan docs, which I'm going to live with for 10 years, and make sure that they're advantageous to the company. So it's this kind of wide variety of stuff that you necessarily wouldn't have thought was finance related, but is very, very important, and very big part of that. And that's kind of where your day ends up.
And I definitely kind of agree with Tim and the rest of the panel here, particularly on definitely the balance in finance. And I think it's often overlooked between both the quantitative and qualitative aspects of that business, where you're analyzing on a constant basis, both real, kind of tangible risk as well as kind of human capital or incentive-related risk in terms of kind of properly structuring, investments to allow and enable people and partners to succeed. So in my side of the business, I'd say about just from a kind of a day-to-day basis, probably about 40% of my time is based on evaluating new investments for the firm. And I think as it relates to my experience at UChicago in executing on that, I think the ability to be, highly skeptical, highly critical, learn how to ask questions and reach conclusions from multivariate data sets very quickly allows me to be pretty efficient in that, and along with the other members of the investment team in that regard. The other 40%, or another 40%, is focused on executing on deals we currently have in the pipeline, and that's very detail-oriented work and very similar, and I could agree completely with what Timmy's saying, anywhere ranging from loan documents to tenant interviews, to analyzing as much as you can on a demographic basis and on a market basis. And that's, I think, really where, in as much as I think we're all ultimately kind of working in, the investment market or the financial market, ultimately I think the largest value, and I'd be curious to see what the panel thinks, but in terms of value that I feel like I'm adding, and then I think where firms can really outperform is in their capability to manage risk, and risk management isn't strictly a quantitative exercise, and value at risk models. It's a much more complex process, and I'd say the overarching view of my job, and kind of what one of our managing principals who heads the firm and runs it, he tells our investors that he's our chief risk manager. He's not our chief investment officer. He's not our chief executive officer. He's there to manage and think about risk and quantify them. And there's certain risks that you can't quantify, but you can be aware of, which allows you to be a good investment manager. And then the remaining portion of the day is really focused on working with the asset managers once we execute an investment to make sure we optimize those outcomes for our investors.
Sure. And for me, as a first-year analyst in the M&A team, I spend most of my time on the PowerPoint and Excel, and I spend some time occasionally on the internet trying to do industry and market research. So as a first-year analyst, my main responsibility includes creating presentations for client meetings and driving the merger consequences, DCF, comparable companies models, and sometimes you're expected to update the models based on the client needs, and once a live deal comes in, then you are responsible for the due diligence process. I would say, as a first-year analyst, some most important things you have to pay attention is just don't make a lot of mistakes, because of the trust issue. Once you make one mistake, then people are going to start questioning your work. And second is just pay greater attention to details, and the hours can be very bad. But as long as you enjoy what you're doing, I think you can handle the work-life balance very well. So my next question is, what are some important information you have to follow every day in order to perform your job very well?
Create several checklists and make sure they're in your face all the time. If I got, like, I'm always writing lists and trying to check things off, but there's always something being added to them, and you throw them like everywhere. And so I think one of the most important things is, like, just making sure you're aware of what you have going on, and just if something pops in your mind, write it down and keeping that list going. Listen to what everyone does in this panel. It's not like you're going up there and you're just, you have this one deal you're working on and that's it. It sounds like there's, from what I'm hearing it from everyone else and from my job, that too, is there's so much going on that you just need to track this stuff. And then be cognizant of what's going on, and time deadlines and all this stuff. Because if you can do that, you can start tackling the projects easier. And there's a lot out there for you to do. There's not enough time in the day to really get done everything you want.
I would say in agreement. For me, I guess I'm not such a list person, but my calendar is my life. I don't know where I'm going unless it's on there, because there's so much going on. And every single thing that I need to do is on there. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's how, because we do have so much going on and we're pulled in so many different directions, that's the only way you could manage it and be effective at what you're doing.
I would add and I do both. I keep lists and I have my calendar. But the other thing, because there's always something unexpected coming at us, always. And I think the other thing that is important to keep in mind is when these things come at you, what's the most critical? Just because this is coming at you now, if it's less critical, don't take it off your list, keep it on your list, but prioritize. And keep in mind what's the most important thing that you have to get done.
Yeah, I think, and if you talk, we're up here and we're kind of, so there's 3 people who are in wealth management. And I bet if you looked under the hood of the car, so to speak, all of our businesses would look a little different. So hopefully you'll gain a little perspective from our different, kind of views of the world. But one of the things, and I think I'm kind of reiterating what the other folks said, which is it's kind of systems and processes. Right, in wealth management, you know who your prospective clients are, you know who your clients are, and then you have to understand the underlying portfolios and the assets they're in. So having systems to manage that, however you do it, you're all smart people, you all have good, University of Chicago brains, knowing what those things are, and then, to echo Barbara's sentiment, being able to, on a daily basis, prioritize, and just stay organized in that manner. And then I think, what oftentimes, especially if you're a first-year analyst or you're an associate, is sometimes you kind of forget the big picture. Like, what's what are you really doing there? And I was sharing at lunch. I said, somebody was asking me for an interview tip, and I said, one thing, don't make mistakes, right? But you're all UFC people. You know how to execute very well. But understand that, that associate who's going to hire you and that vice president, they just did your job and they just worked 80 hours a week. And you know what? They're tired too. And every day they've got their boss, whether it's the associate or the VP or the director or the managing director, breathing down their neck. And they're all trying to get their bonus and they're all sweating it out. So take a step back. And if I was in an interview, I'd say, hey, there's a lot of smart people. And this guy went to Princeton, this one to Harvard, and this guy went to Stanford. But I'm here, as a professional. I'm going to do the best I can. But I get what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to put together books, sophisticated models, be very responsive to clients. And at the end of the day, I want to make your job easier. I want to make you look good to your boss. When I sit down with clients, I think most of the people who come to us, they don't need a lot more money. They're pretty wealthy when they show up at our doorstep. So to the extent that we can be active listeners and ask appropriate questions, just like you guys are supposed to do to us. Figure out what makes them tick. What are they afraid of? What motivates them? You're going to be able to establish some good, some good relationships. And whether that's kind of trying to fly up the line at a McKinsey or a BCG or a Credit Suisse or a Goldman, or whether you're in a wealth management business and you're a managing director of an investment bank pitching business. So I think, you've got to have systems and processes to manage your everyday life, but continually take a step back and say, why am I here? What at the end of the day am I trying to accomplish after, you're sitting there at 2 a.m. on a Saturday going, why in the hell did I take this job? This is insane. But, at the end of the day, that perspective is somewhat helpful.
Thank you. All right, next question. What are some qualities and skills that the industry is looking for right now? And more specifically, what are some qualities and skills that you think make you stand out from your peers?
Sure, so maybe I'll start this one. So I think just from a broad base, and I think one of the recommendations at least that I would have if I were sitting in your shoes and something that, if nobody told me, which is don't try to grow up too quickly. I think you're at UChicago because you're smart, you're intellectually curious, you want and like to be challenged, and you like to be around smart people. So when you have that combination of factors, typically good things happen. And what I mean by kind of growing up too quickly, and now that I'm sitting on kind of the other side of the interview table, when I have interviewees, whether at graduate or undergraduate level, that have kind of a genuine demonstrated interest, but not kind of full knowledge in the sector, and have demonstrated an interest in working hard and asking good kind of genuine questions. Those folks stand out immeasurably, as it compares to the folks that come in that have read, and I'm suggesting you still read them, but have read the what are the green books called? The Wall Street Guide and all that kind of stuff, and the polished shoes. So I think one of those is to keep yourself sober and have some real sobriety when it comes to those factors. And then I think the second aspect, and I was going to comment on the last question, but we should obviously keep the panel moving here. But as it relates to making mistakes, I think there's two types, right? So one is kind of detail orientation and realizing and putting in the proper work ethic and attention to detail to not make those types of mistakes. But the second aspect of mistakes is really putting yourself in a position to earn responsibility, earn the right to have an opinion, and earn the right to really make mistakes and not to be afraid of that. And in that regard, one of the things that I think you shouldn't lose sight of is not to be afraid of making mistakes of a certain type.
I think you posed an interesting question, at least with respect to wealth management, when you talked about what is the industry looking for and what do you think makes you stand out. I may be the great cynic in the group. I think all the industry is looking for is good salespeople. I think to some degree the industry is very...
Agree wholeheartedly.
I think to some degree, not everyone who are the big policymakers really care a whole lot about the client. My own personal philosophy is, at the end of the day, if they're own clients, we don't have jobs. And I think that's just something, I think that you owe it to yourselves to really talk to people and to have honest discussions with people and to learn what an industry is all about. And all of us here and anyone at the University of Chicago who is an alum who has indicated they're open to talking to students. If we say it, we mean it. Don't be shy about contacting us and asking to sit and talk for 15 minutes or a half hour. I've done it, and people can attest that I am very honest. Personally, what do I think sets me apart? And I'm not saying I'm unique. I'm thinking everybody at this table is the same, but I think my honesty with my clients, my integrity with my clients, the fact that they know they can trust me and that I'm looking out for their best interest.
In terms of skills, I agree with everything that everyone's really said. I think you being University of Chicago students have an advantage over others in that in wealth management you need to be able to think critically. And you need to be able to think critically when dealing with human situations and dig deeper to understand what exactly your client is asking you or what exactly is prohibiting them from hiring you, so that you can then take control of that situation again. And so that's something that's really unique, at least for me when I was here, to really think critically about every single situation. And that's a skill that I don't think a lot of people have, so you're all very lucky there. And then the other thing is really people. Are you able to be a people-oriented person in wealth management? At least from the area where I'm coming from, I really care about people. That's why I do what I do. I never planned on doing this. I was always, I just want to help people. And I never thought that this would be the way I would do it, but it is the best way for me to do it. I'm very passionate about it. And, you know, if you guys can find something in finance, whether it's wealth management or another area, but you're passionate about it, you'll be able to interact with individuals. They'll become your clients because you're smart, but they can see your passion and they'll trust you and they'll know you have integrity and they'll know that you'll protect them and help them reach whatever their goals are. So that's really just something to foster and try to put yourselves in situations where you can exercise your passion, even if it's not in a work environment, but through activities at school or supporting nonprofit organizations or things like that, because that will give you more power.
All right, just speaking of the hiring and recruiting, could you give us some examples? I'm sure all of you have participated in the recruiting efforts for your firm. Could you give us examples of typical mistakes that candidates make during the interview process or on the applications?
I would just say I don't really participate that much. I will refer people to HR, but in hearing conversations for people that have just come back from interviews, you guys are all dressed properly. I don't know if it's this day and age in technology, but not dressing properly for an interview. If you're going to an investment, services firm, making sure you've got your suit on, your tie on, your skirt's the right length, your shoes. I mean, looking the part is huge, and you'd be surprised how many people show up and don't look the part. And also making sure they know you're smart, but making sure that you can communicate effectively and eloquently. And we spend so much time, at least I assume that you guys do, communicating via technology and shortening words and all these things that a lot of us aren't used to seeing, so that for you guys that's natural, but when you come to a firm and you're on an interview and you're using words that we're not used to, that can be a problem. At least that's what I've heard when they come back. So that would just be something.
WTF OMG doesn't really fly. Yeah. It's not really, impressing the managing directors.
I guess I'm going to be, again, the questioner here. I think in the wealth management business, when you talk about what sort of mistakes, I think you need to go in with your eyes wide open. I personally don't necessarily think it's the right place to go out of college. I would hire none of you. Yeah, right now. And it would be because of your own best interests. First of all, it will greatly narrow the possibilities for you going forward. I think having been a banker, that could be a great place. You'll learn more analytical skills, you'll learn how to do deals, you'll learn about all different industries. But this business, who's going to trust you with their money? No offense. Your parents might not trust you with their money. And unless you're hired to work with a really special group of people who is going to mentor you and groom you, the odds are, and that certainly there could be exceptions, but the odds are it's not going to be a happy situation for you. And I would just say, and any of you can contact me, I'll talk further. Any one of you can disagree with me, but if you notice, all of us who are in this field have done other things first. Yeah, Barbara basically just stole my thunder, because having been on this side of the business now for, I guess, a little over 13, almost 14 years, I would encourage you, go work as a real estate private equity analyst, understand the debt markets, go, pay your dues and be an analyst at an investment bank, or work at a hedge fund. If you can latch onto a McKinsey or a Booz or a BCG, get some experience under your belt so you develop some bodies of expertise. Because at the end of the day, when you sit across from somebody who's a 70-year-old billionaire, and you have to convince that person who's just spent 50 years in the trenches that you're the person, you better have a story to back you up, and you better have some real knowledge that shows you have some understanding of what's going on in the marketplace. Now, none of us do this alone. We have teammates, we have wonderful firms behind us.
but cutting your teeth in an industry that is not wealth management specific. I literally just had a conversation 2 weeks ago with the CEO of our half of the world for Credit Suisse. I said, one of the biggest mistakes we're making is we're hiring kids in MBAs, not even undergrads. I said, is it age discrimination that I think, people should be at least 35 before we even let them walk in the door? So I think it's one of the best businesses out there, but I would highly, highly encourage you to go do some other things, to get some just general life experience as well as some specific industry knowledge. It's helpful for me that I can talk private equity. I used to work for the guy who was one of Irving B. Harris's best friends. You've got a story there, and you can say, hey, I learned, I was in the trenches, and you can share that. So one of the other things I think we're supposed to do is maybe compare and contrast, kind of like for us, what wealth management is, or, looking at other parts of the business universe. And we can do that in a little while, probably in the Q&A part. There's a lot of wonderful advantages. It's just very, very difficult, to pick a number if you're younger than 30, 35, to sit down and have that conversation with CEOs and people who've built very, very substantial business over decades.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so one other thing I want to throw out there too is, be prepared for this stuff. Go to every interview that you have, assuming that's going to be technical. Don't think that you're just going to be able to walk in and kind of like smooth your way through it. The worst thing in the world you can do is go into an interview pretend like you know something that you don't, because you will be found. People will ask you questions and it does not work out well. And this goes anywhere from like banking technical knowledge to, I was out the other night with a friend of mine who's a partner at Blair, and he was talking about interviews he did. And he's interviewing people at another school, and this one girl, he was really digging the interview, liked it, and she mentioned something about Weber, and he's like, no, I was perking my ears up, I'm a German white Protestant, I love Weber. And so he asked her a bunch of questions, and she looks at him and she's like, I didn't really read it. It was on the reading list. I kind of skimmed through it, read some Spark Notes, read some Wikipedia pages. I don't really know much about him though. And he's like, are you kidding me? Why would you tell me you liked Weber if you don't know anything about him? And afterwards, he was laughing because she wrote him a note, and she goes, thank you for interviewing me, I appreciate it. P.S. I didn't know I needed to know so much about Weber to get a job at William Blair. And Sam was like, well, you did, sorry. But so things like that, just don't get over your skis. When you're in these interviews, stay in your comfort zone, talk about what you know. I've had good interviews and I've had horrible ones where I tried to connect things that I should not be connecting because I had no idea, I just wanted to talk. And don't do that. Learn as much as you can, but stay within your comfort zone in these interviews. You'll be much better off.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that very briefly, it's okay that you don't know anything and we're not expecting you to. What I think we're trying to generally assess is that, A, you have a work ethic and you can demonstrate it, and B, you know how to listen and you know how to take signals, and you start off the interview one way and it ends another way. You can very much tell, and I don't know if you've been in, kind of the group interview, the Goldman style. I think I had three MDs and a principal, on a 4-on-1 interview, and I actually ended up loving it. It was 3 weeks later when I kind of thought about what was going on, but these are tests for basically seeing how you kind of conduct yourself under a variety of circumstances. And with that being said, while you do have to learn the technical aspects and think about it, don't let that stall you or encroach kind of your neuroses or to be nervous. Try to give yourself just a general sense of levity. If you don't get the job, you don't get the job. And there's more parity in these things than sitting on your side of the table. Just as much as we're trying to assess you, you should be trying to assess us. And in the candidates that I see, I think that the ones that are kind of most genuine and have demonstrated real interest and real research, I think it shows. And then two, in that question period, be genuine. Don't be nervous to ask dumb questions or good questions, but questions that are meaningful to you and demonstrate that what you're trying to consider. And then I think a final simple one, and this is not a UChicago kid, this is a Wharton kid, but went through a few rounds of interviews and was sitting with the managing principal, and one of his questions was, what's the limit for working late to spend on food? So I would just generally recommend you don't ask that question. Just not extended an offer.
All right, thank you. So on a very micro level, because I just went through about 200 resumes last night for summer analyst positions, some advice about the process. First of all, don't have typos on your resumes. Trust me, a lot of people do, and that really shows your attention to details. University of Chicago's full name is the University of Chicago, and make sure you put the THE on there. And also the alignment, those kind of stuff, because we've been spending a lot of time, trying to align our presentations, that kind of stuff. So we're really picky about those kind of stuffs. So make sure you pay great attention to those kind of minor details, I would say. And that really shows your interest and efforts. And in terms of the interview process, I think know your firm really well. I mean, it's okay that you know what is investment banking, but walking into a Lazard interview saying I'm just interested in investment banking won't make you stand out. It's very helpful to understand what's so different about this firm and what makes it different from the other peers by talking to people, following the news for the company constantly. Then if you can differentiate the firm you're applying to during the interview, and you can differentiate yourself from other interviewees, how you're supposed to differentiate yourself and do very well on your job, right? So those are just my 2 cents after going through the resumes last night.
You could add spell check to that. Just because the word spelled correctly doesn't mean it's the right word.
Yes, right. And next question. So I want to ask more about your experience at UChicago. How have the resources and your experience at the school helped you get to where you are right now? And maybe could you name some of the key takeaways you obtained at UChicago that has benefited your work on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'll be pretty concise. There were 2 things. One came up at lunch, and I said, we all took tests. We all got into Chicago. It's a great thing. And whether it's your SAT, ACT, or just kind of going through the core curriculum, you kind of figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. And really, I was a kind of a quant, math, econ person. And I mean, by my test scores, I was barely literate, when it came to reading and writing. So, really go after your weaknesses and use this time in Chicago to develop those skills. Because you're going to get out. And the nice part is when you put your resume on the table, people are going to know you're smart. But, as the gentleman referenced, you can't bluff your way through these stuff. These people have been there, done that, and they're good. So really take advantage of the well-rounded, core curriculum and really, stay, as the woman talked in the keynote, jump out of your comfort zone. You might not get the best grade in the class, but, I mean, very honestly, when you see resumes and stuff that I see that comes through my email, people can't write. I mean, people simply cannot write. And I said, the Literate Schoolhouse, which I guess is still around, was terrifying. But in retrospect, my biggest regret is that I didn't take it. So, I think that's one component. And then, an area where people who came out kind of my time, I think the university's doing a better job at this. Part of the reason I'm successful are my peers. And I played a couple of sports, and I was in a fraternity, and I look now, and the friendships I have, now my friends are managing directors. One runs a division of Blackstone, and, one runs, if you've ever heard of Stevie Cohen, one was running his private equity money. And, being able to, talk to friends and learn from friends, and, I had, 2 wonderful bodies of experience in private equity and trading, but at 27 years old, I was sitting there going, what in the hell am I going to do? It was really like, how does this career path work? And talking to other friends, and it was amazing, basically the consensus was, why aren't you in wealth management? You're made for that business. And so, having friends that you can trust who understand or going through the same things, maintain those relationships. It takes effort. Building a career in a vacuum is really, really tough. But having those relationships, because, one of the blessings of the university is you're surrounded by, a group of the smartest people on the planet. And don't take that for granted.
I guess one of the things that I took away, because I think you're much luckier in a way than I was, because you have so many resources to help you now. And that truly just didn't exist. But what I did learn how to do was really think, to think broadly, to think deeply. I was always, like Christian, very quantitatively oriented, so I was good with analysis, but I really learned to apply it much better. And the contacts that I made from my first week of orientation are still my closest friends and people who've been able to help me out and vice versa over my life.
So I'm definitely going to echo what Barbara said in terms of the best resource was really the classes that taught you how to think critically. And I know I said it before, I'll say it again, especially for wealth management. Being able to truly analyze a situation is amazing. And you might not realize right now as you're taking these classes, you're just trying to get a grade, you're writing a paper, but these are skills that will carry you through in every single class that you're taking. And then the other thing is I learned to be a little bit less rigid. And so, to take that art history class or to take the world music class or to, I enjoy French. So I just kept taking more French classes even though, allow yourself to still thirst for that knowledge. And that'll follow you in life and your career, and you'll be able to be more successful. And that's really something I learned here at U of C, is to always push for more information, to make yourself better, to make those around you better, and just to think critically.
Yeah, and I'd only add, I think the well-rounded aspect, is it. And I think what's great about UChicago and what was something that I realized kind of when I was in the grade, largely through, Tim and I were in the same fraternity, and we had plenty of kind of international students there, and the whole concept of a liberal arts education is kind of foreign to international students sometimes. And I think you all should, on a very specific basis, kind of embrace the liberal arts kind of mindset, because it's going to allow you to succeed. And I see it time and time again of people in my firm and then in the interview process, and where I see some of the people that I met at UChicago succeeding and not succeeding. Those that did challenge themselves and realized that, the world is not black and white and is not strictly, kind of a quantitative endeavor, I think are most dangerous in terms of being kind of flexible or flexible-minded thinkers. And then I think along those same lines is don't be predictable. And that's kind of a personal and kind of a general kind of work suggestion I have is to not be predictable.
Yeah. So we kind of wrap this up. Don't go to the library on Saturday nights. The dining halls are shut down. You should also be out, not on campus buildings doing other things. The best thing you're going to get from this education is the people you're surrounded by. Because Chicago, you're there for 4 years, and then afterwards, you really have the friendships that that persist forever. And it's amazing to look back and think about the things I wish I'd done more. I wish I had, the flag grants, if there's more foreign language things I didn't really get involved with. And you think of the opportunities the university provides, particularly 10 years later. It's wild for me to think of what they offered back in when I started in 2003 versus what we have in 2013. You guys just have this wealth of opportunity that's mind-boggling. Go meet people. Go to Jimmy's on Thursday night. Go to the pub on wing night. These are the people later on that you're going to be in London, or you're going to be in, Mumbai, and you're going to realize that they're there, and you're like, oh man, I didn't know you were in Mumbai. Let's go get a drink. Let's hang out. Oh, you live in Mumbai. You actually know where to go. Great. Otherwise, you're eating street food, and then that doesn't end well. So these are the things you should contemplate. There's a strong desire to get straight A's and achieve that personal gratification that you did well academically, but there's more to it that the school offers you, and the human component is so valuable, and it will all persist the rest of your life. So I really, really encourage you guys to invest in that portion of the university.
So last question for me, I would like to push a little bit harder. Is there anything that you wish you had done at UChicago that might potentially benefit you in your current job? I mean, personally for me, I wish I had taken more politics and history classes versus, I wish econometrics wasn't part of the econ requirement, because that wasn't helpful to my job at all. The reason being, history always repeats itself, and, carrying that tools of historic analysis, learning about the strategy really helped me in terms of understanding my partner's M&A strategy, and, being able to, know what they were coming from also helped me conduct my analysis.
I think, if I look back on it, so I've been out for 17 or 18 years, I think the challenging part, because somebody asked me this at lunch, I said, you're smart, you're going to make the best decisions you can, class selection, those types of things. Those are pretty individual things, but the overarching kind of concept in retrospect was I wish I had a little more fun, right? And the university has changed a little bit in terms of trying to improve the overall undergraduate experience. But I was so weighed down, right? It was so competitive, and am I going to get a 3.2 or a 3.3 or a 3.5 or 3.7? And it's like this constant overbearing pressure I put on myself to take a step back and go, hey, just, try to enjoy a little bit of the ride along the way, have some laughs, enjoy it. You can have fun and work hard simultaneously. But there was kind of this overarching feeling that, man, you almost had to be miserable, right? If you weren't suffering, you weren't working hard enough. And in that common theme, I hope is been a little bit removed. But kind of, this class, that class, whatever. The best classes I had were the ones unexpected, right? I was an econ guy, and my favorite class was about, about the biology of stress. But yeah, try to have a good time while you're there. Go to Jimmy's, have a beer, have some relationships, have a good time, because at the end of the day, you have your whole life to learn, but the bonds you'll develop now will hopefully last for many decades in the future.
And my favorite class was Rocks and Stars, which I think they just call astrophysics and geophysics now, but it was fantastic. If I think about, and I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, but I wish I had known more then. Like, if I had been 22 before I went, I would have appreciated more all of the opportunities to learn that I had. I would have probably, I know this sounds silly, but I probably would have appreciated Thucydides more, or Plato more. So, that's not really advice. It's just saying I didn't know the opportunities I had when I went.
So for me, and they're really reinforcing this, I commuted. So I live in a southern suburb, so I commuted back and forth. And so I did not, in undergrad, form these really close relationships with people. I mean, the friends I had, there's a couple of them I still talk to. I studied abroad with a group of people. We had the best time ever, but now I'm feeling really bad because I'm like, where are these people? I don't know where they are. I kind of was able to right that wrong a little bit when I came back for grad school, so I do keep in touch with a lot of the people that I went to grad school with, but none of them went to University of Chicago for undergrad. So that's just something I would say is make sure as life goes on and you get busy, stay in touch with everybody.
Learn as many languages as you can. That's the one thing I regret. I grew up in rural New Hampshire, right? So we don't really speak any other languages there, other than English. It's really not like there's a huge amount of practice you can do. And so I came to Chicago, and I knew Spanish kind of, and served me well. But you're going to want to travel, and you're going to want to go places, and just learn so many languages. Nothing can be more fun or funnier than I was in Istanbul about a year ago, and a friend of ours randomly showed up, and he knows languages beyond its Kale. Yeah. And we're in the street, and we're trying to figure out where we're going. And he just started speaking Turkish to people. I'm like, when did you learn Turkish? He's like, I just picked up a couple books in the plane, just figured, put some words together. And I'm like, he's like, it's really not that bad, it's kind of like Arabic in a way. I'm like, what? I'm like, you're Swedish, and you speak Swedish, and English, and Spanish, and you learn Arabic? All right. And the ability for him to go up to people in the street and just talk to them, and there's some like, oh, you do Turkish? You don't look Turkish. Let me talk to you. That'll serve you very well. So learning these languages, you have no idea what type of friends you can make in really bizarre places where things look very precarious, and all of a sudden you start speaking the language, and they're your best friend buying you a drink. So.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add is I think the overarching comment in terms of getting to Jimmy's or getting to know people is definitely be thoughtful about the relationships you're making and really kind of learning how to interact with people from a variety of backgrounds, which is kind of obvious. I think second, and I did it. I wish I would have actually studied abroad twice, but do a study abroad program. Maybe it doesn't tee you up to get the perfect internship here or there, but take a little risk and study abroad. Put yourself physically outside of your comfort zone. And then I think the final one is to really utilize the alumni network. And I think you're here and you're meeting folks, but I think utilize it, in a more substantive aspect. I think that's what I wish I would have done. particularly in Chicago, but we're all across the country, and there's alumni networks and there's active alumni in, I'm sure, every sector you can imagine or have an interest in. And I think what I would have done is substantively, not strategically, not teeing up a strategy that I can know some guy at Goldman, so when I meet the guy when he's on campus, I can say I talked to X guy to demonstrate I have an interest, and then I'm thoughtful, and then I care. That's important. You can play the game, and that's important. And sometimes you do have to put your head down and play the game, and you might as well play it well and play it to win. But with that being said, keep levity and try to substantively learn and position yourself. Right now, you're in a position, and you're getting some very good guidance in terms of kind of the wealth management industry and investment management industry in terms of substantively interacting and interviewing folks. Send us emails. We're willing to talk. If you send me your resume and want to get hired, I'm not going to respond the same way if you send me, hey, Josh, I realize you work here, you studied this, can we have a coffee? And I think a lot of people, and I'd venture to say 90% plus of alumni will be very responsive to that. And I think you guys should all take that, you guys and girls should take that as an opportunity to really do due diligence in terms of what you want to be doing for the next couple of years. And realizing that, you could avert possibly a bad decision now by kind of stepping back and taking the alumni network, as serious as it is.
Sure. And thank you. I want to add that based on my experience, if you want to be a great analyst, then, score an A in financial accounting, corporate finance at Booth, that's fine. But almost all these senior partners, at least for Lazard, they always have an area of expertise outside finance. My boss used to be a basketball player in NCAA Division I. He was also a lawyer prior to joining Lazard. Going to the client meetings and to see him, really, the numbers on the books really doesn't matter. Clients are not interested in that at the beginning of the meeting, but it's always the small talk, the common interest, common experience that they share really bond you with the clients and be able to earn their trust.
Hi, my name is Hao. I'm a second year double majoring in economics and statistics. And my question is, to all of you, do you think the first jobs that we got right off the college will be important, and how is that, or not?
I think it's important in that it helps you figure out whether you're happy and enjoying that. Do you think that job's going to be the one that you stick with forever, or should you have expectations or put that much pressure on yourself to say, oh, this is where I'm going to be, and no, I don't think that. It's a learning experience, and I think that for all of you, you're young, you have freedom. Now is your time to try out different jobs. That's the only way you're going to figure out what really makes you tick, what makes you happy, so you can have that ultimate success that you're looking for.
One of the titles of this, I think, was Mapping Your Wall Street Career. Right. And I just have to laugh because mapping.
Somebody who's never had a Wall Street career.
Right.
Who wrote that?
If somebody said to me, how did you map your career? I guess I would have said either, given my era, I would have said I was totally stoned and just did this thing. Or you could say I was totally drunk. A lot of things are going to change. Right. Your interests may change. Your industry may change. So I think you always need to keep your eyes open. You need to be flexible. You need to be thinking. There's nothing wrong with, I think, whatever you're doing, even if you decide, I don't want to do this anymore, still do the best job you can at it. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I've spent 10 years doing this, I think I want to do something else. You just need to be prepared and thinking all the time. Because sometimes you may do something else because you want to. Sometimes you may do something else because you have to. Just always keep your eyes open, and the first job is just the first job.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, I think...
You don't have to stand up, by the way. You can stand if you want to.
If I were to throw a number at it, and just for context, I've been out almost 2 decades, and I look at my friends, and we used to joke, you were pre-law, pre-med, pre-money. Those were, some of the kind of majors. If you were pre-money, you were trying to go investment banking or consulting. It seems like that hasn't changed a whole lot. But I would say probably of the folks who went into, investment banking, 2-year analyst programs, 20%. If you fast forward 18 years, 20% are still in those businesses. But I think it's a launching pad, right? You get inside of an investment bank, and it's like any other business. They've got salespeople, marketing people. Are you a prop trader? Are you a wealth management person? You know, or are you an investment banker? Are you on the equity side, the debt side? Are you a principal investor, client facing, right? All of those sleeves are very relevant components to what, you know, comprises financial institutions. But once you're there, you know, she shows you did what it took to get there. And then you kind of, this whole world opens up to you and you go, I might be a little better at that part of the bank or over there. And to echo kind of what Barbara said earlier, it's real easy to go from investment banking to go work for a manufacturing company, to go to work in wealth management. It's real tough to go the other way, right? So I always kind of say, you know, it's really good to start out there and get your path going in that direction. Your world's going to open up. You'll start to figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at, what's exciting, what's frustrating. And then from there, you can kind of make strategic decisions based on the opportunities that are there. A lot of the businesses that my friends wanted to go into in 95, 96, 97 don't exist. If you go back, you know, 15 years ago, Chicago, we were throwing some numbers out, you know, it was a big trading town. There were probably 5,000, 6,000 people in this city making a lot of money, doing real well. And none of those businesses exist anymore. Technology and hedge funds basically took them all away. So whatever you think you might even be good at, be careful, because that job might not exist in 10 years. Disruptive technologies are, you know, innovation's incredible, and disruptive technologies are taking jobs that were at one time very, very prestigious and well-respected and high-earning positions, and they don't exist.
Yeah. One thing to throw out there that you talk about first jobs. If you're on the track where you want to do consulting or you want to do banking, make sure you guys do something over one of the summers. Like the third year summer, you're going to think that, oh man, I didn't get that investment banking job or the consulting job. They don't have a lot of internships, but they have a lot of people they hire. So do something. You know, if you don't get the job doing sales and trading at JP Morgan, you find somebody at the CBOT or the CME, like some of the smaller shops there that maybe will take you on as a summer intern. Just get something in your resume that you can point to and be like, you know, I'm interested. I've done it a little bit of it before. I'm not expertise, but I know I like it, and you can talk about it. So even the second years too, like, you know, my personal feeling is that if you're a second year, go do something fun for the summer. You know, if you can do it, go travel, do like the foreign language stuff. That's my bias. But if you don't want to do that, you know, banks may not hire you because you're a second year. So go find one of these smaller firms that maybe will take you on. And even if you work part-time, like 20 hours, at least you did something. And then you can use that later on to be like, well, Goldman Sachs, you know, I didn't work for you guys, but here's what I've done before, and this is why I think I like it and I can be good at it, and this is probably why you should hire me, because I'm awesome. So you know, think about it in terms of those terms.
Use those words exactly.
I work for 1% now.
Yeah. But Christian, I want to follow up with your answer earlier. So sadly, there's not a lot of consulting jobs and investment banking jobs available for everyone, right? But as you just said, private wealth is interested in people with prior investment banking background. But could you give us an example of a hiring of someone from a non-typical background, and maybe tell us about how he or she approached your firm and what makes him or her stand out in the process?
Well, I think there's a couple givens when you get a resume from Chicago. Economics, there's a typical profile we see. And something stood out to me, and this person might be in this room right now, because this person called or sent me an email and said, I saw in the directory, do you guys have an internship position? And firms are funny about that stuff, and Credit Suisse is kind of reevaluating their program. And I said, basically call me in 6 months, because we're taking a look at things. But the most interesting thing, and this kind of goes back to what Barbara said, what is in my business? You got to be able to sell. You have to be able to sit down, have a high emotional intelligence. IQ's great, we know you got that, but do you have a high EQ? And this person had sold cutlery, right? And it's like this kind of like this door-to-door type of thing, and put up really impressive numbers. But I looked at that and said, this person can sell. They were selling knives and forks, right? But as much as that stood out, I went, this person knows what it's like to initiate contact with somebody, develop a dialogue, create a value proposition, and ask them for business. And even though they're selling what's essentially a commoditized product, that was, in our business, you have to sell.
You also see a lot of people who, and the industry loves this, you see retired athletes, because professional athletes make a lot of money, and so these people have contacts. You also see a lot of ex-retired military. Again, they have huge professional networks, and military people will say, well, you know, these are my brothers and sisters, and they're going to get my business. So you see people from so many different backgrounds.
And this lends itself to, you know, kind of the conversations about relationships. Do other things if you have passions, if it's golf, if it's art, if it's classic cars, whatever it is, music of, you know, of some capacity. You know, people have, you know, these affinity groups, people are drawn to one another through commonality. And oftentimes you see wonderful businesses built in wealth management around concepts like that. I'll see, and maybe it's, you know, even a university. Chicago doesn't do a great job at it, but buddy in my office is a Princeton guy. I said, you know, what percentage of your clients are Princeton? He goes, 90%. Oh, that's kind of statistically relevant, right? So, you know, having, you know, being a person that's a little more interesting and evolved than just somebody who can do math is pretty important.
Hi, my name's Josh. I'm a second-year economics major. You all talked about not doing wealth management or whatever you're doing for us right out of college. So I was wondering if you could talk a little more in detail about what you did do right out of college. And
Well,
can I sit down first?
I first worked in a research. I first worked in a research lab because my major was biology. But after I got my MBA, I spent quite a long time doing corporate finance and corporate banking.
Yeah, so I did 2 years as a private equity analyst in a family office, and then I was a member of the SIBO. We had a boutique prop trading shop where we basically traded equity and index derivatives for effectively some wealthy folks who backed us.
So I guess actually my answer is going to tie into your question and the previous question, because I was international studies focused on human rights. So not econ, nothing like that. So when I graduated, I worked at a law firm. And I have to say, I find it interesting, my second year, I interned at a bank, and I absolutely hated it. And I said, there's no way I would do this. And look where I am now. So I worked at a law firm, and worked there actually for 3.5 years, because I was like, I'm going to make this work because I wanted to help people. And then realized, I know the law is next door, but the lawyers weren't really about helping people. So I then was like, okay, so I did public policy and worked at a nonprofit of a bank. I was still trying to stay away from banks because I was like, I don't want to be that banker. So I worked at a nonprofit of a bank. But then that's where my passion really started for realizing that when you're handling people's money, you're really, really helping them and influencing their lives and helping keep families together because they're less stressed about their finances, or helping them take better care of themselves health-wise. So I come at this slightly different than everybody else does, because I'm really just, you know, the finance part was something that came afterwards. My main goal was to have a career where I could feel fulfilled every day with helping people. So.
Yeah, I was a government consultant for a company that I thought I was going to be in Boston. And then for that entire year that I worked for them, I was in a place called Red Bank, New Jersey. And I was doing educational work for basically No Child Left Behind. And it was definitely not what I thought I'd be doing. The coolest thing that ever happened though, my dad really liked it. I think it's all right. But I was at a bar once, and I turned to my left, and there's Bruce Springsteen right there. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And he's like, so what'd you say to him? I was like, I just said hi. He's like, you didn't say I was born to run and walk away? And I'm like, no, Dad. He's like, that would have been cool. Your story is not that cool. I'm like,
Nobody ever thought of that one.
yeah. And then, so then I left shortly thereafter because Red Bank is not where I wanted to be.
And I'll start with the conclusion, and it maybe even plays into the last question a little bit too, and that is you're at a point where you can afford to take risk, and don't be afraid to take risk. And along with what I said before about being predictable, there are predictable paths if you want to be a 45-year-old single investment banker that hangs upside down and does, ab exercises. You can do that. Reference American Psycho if you haven't seen it. But so that's possible. But you don't need to be that predictable, and if that's where you want to get, then do it. But if not, and I think in terms of mine, I got an offer from my Metcalf Fellowship to go back abroad and work primarily in London, but also plenty of time in Vienna. In the same group that I had for Deloitte in a pretty exciting kind of industry group. again, focused on hedge funds and private equity, which is what I was interested in and very excited about kind of the exposure there and working both due diligence on firms themselves on behalf of funds, and then also working with the firms and doing investment due diligence. And so that was kind of compelling, as well as would have obviously set me up with a very kind of proven skill set and a structure and a more structured, I suppose, learning curve. And about 3 weeks before I was set to just sign that offer and start looking for housing, et cetera, had a discussion with a guy that I met while at UChicago through the network that was working at a large investment firm out of New York that was, at that point in time, I think it was at $7.5 billion on the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, investor redemptions took it to about $1 billion. That was scary and not good, but the guy was sharp and got it. And he was going back to work between Pittsburgh, San Fran, and Montana at the firm I ultimately took an offer at, and this was a role where we were starting up kind of a de novo platform or de novo fund for a very high net worth family out of Pittsburgh, and then we brought in external investors, and this was an opportunity where it was going to be myself executing on a learning curve, asking a lot of questions, getting a ton of exposure to senior level executives, and I think that was a conscious decision, and I guess there was some risk to going abroad and some nervousness there, but I was ready to do it and excited to do it, and it was certainly probably the more obvious or safe path, but I knew I ultimately wanted to be in the investment side of the business, ultimately wanted to be in a position to take and analyze risk and have that kind of umbrella or standing under that umbrella. And I took that opportunity and it worked out. And so I think, I would suggest to all of you, to be willing and able to take those types of risks as they arise.
My name is Brennan King. I'm a second year at the university. This is maybe more a question for Mr. Habits and Ms. Adelman. I was just wondering, you both have emphasized marketing and salesmanship as a very important skill. And I was wondering, as you noted, these aren't the most emphasized skills at the university. Given your own experience sort of developing these expertise over time, how might you recommend students, in addition to maybe this route of selling cutlery, start working on developing these skills?
I guess what I would say is, in your early jobs, try and become involved in jobs where you can be dealing with clients in some way, like at banks or other firms. I'll be the first person to tell you I don't consider myself a salesperson. Before I went into this business, I made it clear I never intended to pick up the phone and call a stranger. So I'm not the best from that perspective, but I am very good at developing relationships. So am I the ideal candidate for the industry? Nah, not from a selling perspective. But I think you need to recognize your own strengths, and where you recognize shortcomings, talk to people and think about how can you overcome them. I would never be, in a million years, the person to go out and sell anything door to door, nor would I have any desire to do so. So I had to look at what other route could I take to do this effectively for me. I do it through a lot of networking, and I learned over time, because I used to go to every networking event on earth, and then I decided that was really stupid, and that I should just be involved with organizations where I also had a personal interest. Because, as Kristen was saying, then you're a whole lot more effective, and people can see the interest that you have. So there's more than one route to get to what you need to do.
I just wanted to jump in there and say, to support that, if you can find, this would test your skills, find an organization that you are, that has a cause that you really believe in. At some point, they might have a fundraising event. You would then be helping them raise money. You wouldn't be realizing that you're learning sales skills, but it also is something that's really good. Maybe you could have on your resume as an extracurricular that you did help bring in X amount of dollars for this organization, but it has to be something that you genuinely care about. If you're just doing it because I just said so, no, you're not going to be successful at it. It's got to be something that you're passionate about and something where you could rise to the top and other people would recognize your skills, because your natural skills will come forward. But that's a good way to test out your sales skills, because I don't consider myself salesy at all. I'm an advisor. I'm not pushing anything on you. I'm an advisor. You pay me as an advisor. So I try to back away from that as much as possible, but you do have to have the skills.
Yeah, I mean, I think briefly, there's a couple things. One, at the end of the day, you kind of have to, you have to enjoy people. You have to enjoy conversation. If it's not your DNA, it's not. But I look at my buddies I used to trade with, a bunch of MIT quants. I mean, God, it'd be like pulling teeth for these people to have to sit and explain these remedial concepts to these morons. They're trying to persuade to allocate capital with, and so it's kind of is it in your DNA? That's part of it. And then over time, if you look at the people who are the CEOs of major firms, if you look at the managing directors of firms, consulting, investment banking, even the hedge funds do things to a large degree. Those people are good salespeople. They're effectively trying to persuade somebody to see the view of the world that they see. And I mean, part of it's life experience. Part of it is, read books. If I was to get, I never got an MBA, and people said, "Would you ever get one?" At this point, kind of too late. But I said, no, I'd get a master's degree in behavioral psychology. Right? If you understand how human beings work, what motivates us, what our insecurities are, what our strengths are. If you understand how human beings function, you get a pretty good handle on many, many areas of business. Read books, internet stuff. I mean, you kind of look at it, if it doesn't make sense to you, it's like somebody is looking at math and it doesn't make sense to them. It might not be the right path to go down.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and special thanks to the panelists here for sharing their genuine advice and experience. Thank you.